And so in this broader sense, metaphysics is the science of the non-empirical. And why did that, what is responsible for the waning of the universal acceptance? It's been seen as common wisdom that, of course, there's a science of the non-empirical. Why did that happen? Well, to get into the real nitty-gritty of why it happened, again, as with everything, needs many, many intricate volumes. But in my most recent book, I put it down to 5 severances which take place within Western Europe, Christian Europe, at the tail end of the Middle Ages, most of them. Some of them are earlier because they are there in virtue of the nature of Christianity. For example, the split between the law and the spirit is already there, suggested by Paul, and the split between temporal power and sacred power is already there, suggested by words ascribed to Jesus, which are render unto Caesar such things as Caesar's and render unto God such things as are God's. And then you have the later splits, like the split between faith and reason that I already alluded to, that happens in virtue of the very idiosyncratic tensions of what the medieval Christian was forced to believe in, at pain of the stake. He was forced to believe in the incarnation. He was forced to revere and the Trinity, which led to a severance between faith and reason that we then blindly adopted. Just as we blindly adopted the secular principle, which is the separation of temporal power, which has its own rationale within Christianity, doesn't have within Islam. And we even adopted and tend to adopt, because we identify with the underlying rationale, just because we're breathing it in without understanding it, of the split between the law and spirit. And this then escalated into the split between knowing, subject, and nature, which is exactly what we're saying at the scientific revolution. Qualitative properties were banished from nature. So there are no essences, what the Aristotelian would call formal causes, and there are no purposes. So there are no essences in nature, and there are no purposes in nature, what the Aristotelian terminology calls final causes. And all that exists in nature are what were branded primary qualities, which are essentially quantitative properties, susceptible to investigation, understanding through mathematical models, with a view to seeing the world mechanically, right? Because of the value that has for predictive power for experiment, because of a change, or kind of will to power, kind of proto-will to powerism that you find in Machiavelli, and you find in Hobbes, and you find elsewhere during that period, and in Bacon. That's the main figure that didn't come to mind, but it's the main figure, Francis Bacon, that because the qualitative aspects of reality cannot be known in an objective science, that's chimerical, we better get on with exploiting the world, putting the natural world on the rack and torturing her for her secrets. It's a very famous phrase ascribed to Francis Bacon. He probably didn't actually say it, but it very much adequately reflects his philosophy. And what he did say is, knowledge is power. And it's with Francis Bacon that we first get this idea that the powers that be, the establishment, the political regime, might want to invest in science in order to become more powerful. And so, yes, metaphysics is a science that was seen both in the Western world and in the Islamic world in the Middle Ages, and in the Islamic world right up until far, far later, and in the West until far, far later, but only in pockets, as the highest science, al-ilm al-a'la, the science that regulates all of the other sciences, and that the science that all of the other sciences in terms of their structure of epistemic justification, as in how do you ultimately justify the truth of what you claim in the given science, has to ultimately be referred to metaphysics for its most fundamental assumptions, its first principles.